The Contagion Empath. Hello, I'm H.G. Tudor. My understanding of empaths is so extensive and complete as a consequence of the fact that I hunt them. Empaths are prey to me. Throughout the entirety of my life, I've had interactions with them, and as my awareness came into being, I recognized empaths. I could almost sniff them out. It's as if they have an aura around them, which tells me that they are an empath and which type they belong to in terms of a majority school. I'm able to determine more about their classification as a consequence of my interaction with them, but I am able to sense the presence of an empath and look to draw them into my fuel matrix, allocating them an appropriate position dependent upon how well they satisfy the prime aims. I have spent years interacting with empaths, studying empaths, observing them, listening to them, watching the tears trickle down their faces, listening to their joyous proclamations, listening to them plead and beg, listening to them preach forgiveness, listening to the way that they pour out the contents of their mind, all of it listened to, observed, tracked, monitored, pinned. From this I composed a huge compendium of work, which you can find either by reading about it at narcsite.com or listening to it through the many videos that I have created. My understanding is such that I've got underneath the skin into the mind of my prey. It is necessary for me to gain that understanding so that I can not only utilize it for my own benefit in terms of the way that I hunt, but then to convey that information, part of which makes me the ultra. There are, as you know, 4 schools of empath: standard, codependent, super, and contagion. Contagion is the rarest school. Certainly, in terms of finding majority contagion, that is the rarest outcome. There are more instances of people having an insignificant, significant, strong, or very strong minority aspect, but finding a majority contagion empath is rare. The contagion empath, just like super and codependent, has that foundation of the standard empath, namely, they have emotional empathy for a wide range of people, that their emotional empathy is deep, that they are governed by decision-making and behavior as a consequence of emotional empathy, that it is the driver behind the things that they say and the things that they do. Thus, with that foundation in place, the contagion has much more on top. In some respects, there would be those that might consider the contagion empath to be the true version of an empath. One that really registers the feelings and emotions of other people, enabling them to read other individuals. But I didn't like to use the term true empath because it would then cause people to think, well, the other ones mustn't be empaths. And therefore, when it came to categorization, I determined that the largest group ought to be known as standard, and then there would be derivations on standard, namely codependent, which is the next largest group after standard, then the much smaller group of super empaths, and the even smaller still group of majority contagion empaths. What is it to be a contagion empath? The contagion empath really, really feels. Whilst any kind of empath will be in tune with people around them, picking up on their emotional reactions, having a decent ability to read the room, the contagion feels to another level. Theirs is a visceral response to the emotions of others, where they actually take on those emotions, feel burdened by them, can almost feel totally overwhelmed by those emotions. where somebody is feeling sad, an empath can recognize that, often even though the individual might not be giving away too many visible signals. But the contagion empath feels that sadness as if it was their own. Some contagion empaths also have the ability to see the aura of other individuals, which conveys to them information about those individual behaviors and characteristics. That they see an aura around that individual, which might convey that they are particularly bereft at that moment in time. That they can see an aura that is associated with joy, an aura associated with ill health, an aura that is occasioned by longing and loss, lots of different deviations upon that aura. That is something that certain majority contagions, and it has to be at the higher level of majority, are able to see. Others don't see the aura, but that doesn't mean that they don't pick up on the feelings of others to any lesser extent. They take on those feelings as if they are their own. And where there are many people around the contagion empath, it often becomes too much, necessitating retreat by the contagion empath, so that they must find themselves a place of solitude and calm to cleanse themselves of the excess energy that they have taken on. It might be the case that they need to go and spend time in the forest, up in the mountains, by the coast, but they must be away from people, because the presence of other people is too much for them. This picking up of the sensations of others varies dependent upon the extent to which they are a contagion. Thus, somebody who is insignificant with regard to their contagion minority element only picks up on it here and there, almost like the occasional standing up of the hairs on the back of their neck. Beyond that, the frequency and duration increases until where you reach somebody who is majority, they will walk down a supermarket aisle and pick up on the emotions and feelings of each person that they walk past. They understand, and they are burdened by the energy that comes their way. There are some who mistakenly believe that the contagion empath is somebody who is able to transfer their feelings onto others. That is not the case. The contagion empath is able to sense that an emotion is occurring, that a feeling is taking place at that moment. And there is the accuracy associated with that to be able to identify and understand the appropriate emotional state and emotional intentions of that other person. Naturally, the contagion empath, as a consequence of the standard empathy which sits within their school, is able to express concern for others, to connect to other people, to care about them by virtue of their empathic traits. However, the sensitivity that the contagion empath has is such that they are able to pick up on emotions far more readily than other types of empath, and that they can engage in a way that by sensing and accurately identifying the emotions of others, they can then adopt the perspective of that other person to then focus on them with their own care and compassion. That they can use the ability to read and comprehend the emotions of other people to then make decisions to be able to assist them. This ability to feel others then can feed into the output of the contagion empath. So that where you have, for instance, a majority contagion that might be a majority geezer or very strong or strong geezer, what happens is they can take on, let's just say, the joy of another person. That they sense and then detect and witness the joy of that other individual, which is transferred to them. But then it becomes amplified by the geezer aspect in terms of their cadre which results in exhilaration. It goes beyond happiness, but it creates a delirious, ungrounded sense of exhilaration. The joy is pushed past, and it becomes a frivolity. And it means that the individual is unable to settle. They keep moving. They end up imprisoned by the exhilaration, even though it stems from joy. That there is a destabilizing effect, which then means that as a consequence of experiencing the almost delirious exhilaration, the contagion empath is forced to retreat and find an alternative place to purge themselves of the excess energy that they have taken on. When a contagion empath comes across somebody who is sad, they naturally have a concern for that individual. But through the contagion, they take on that sadness and can, in effect, unlike with the joy which would remain with the other individual, they can act to lift that sadness and allow it to flow over them. That they take on the sadness themselves, and they are able to distract the giver of that sadness so that they are able to impart and release part of their sadness, if not all, by allowing it to transfer to the contagion empath. Again, this ability to take the emotion away from another individual and almost seal it and remove it is only seen in those with the very highest of percentages. Or ordinarily, with the contagion empath, they feel the emotion of the other individual, which enables them to respond appropriately, to try and help, to offer practical solutions, to offer words of comfort, to undertake steps to alleviate their pain, their sadness, their hurt, their fear. But with certain contagion empaths at the very highest levels, they have the capacity to actually take away that emotion and allow it to settle upon themselves, thus alleviating the subject of the pain, of the fear, of the sadness that they were experiencing. The downside, of course, for the contagion is that they then have to experience and deal with it. Being a skilled worker in those emotions, they are placed in a better position to be able to deal with it, rather than be consumed in the way that the subject was. Lesser narcissists find the contagion empath confusing. The idea of the transference of energy, the ability to feel at such a visceral level, is completely something that a lesser narcissist doesn't get on board with. Lower lesser and middle lesser are unlikely to seek it out, or would mildly tolerate it at an insignificant or significant level. Upper lesser B is disdainful and would only utilize the contagion aspect to revel in the increased fuel provision of causing an overburdened contagion to suffer all the more by being burdened to a greater extent. The upper lesser type A of all the lessers is the only one that would actually positively embrace it, because upper lesser A are often involved in the more spiritual and guru type of work, and therefore an aspect of contagion would be of interest to them. Mid-rangers prefer other schools and cadres. The lower mid-range and middle range A and B gravitate more towards standard empath with some codependency, a touch of super. Again, with contagion, it would only be at the lower levels that it would be tolerated of insignificant and significant. Upper mid-range could handle it to a greater degree, although they don't necessarily seek it out. Graters are more likely to be drawn to contagion as a consequence of a better understanding of the way that they work, and in particular, middle graters. Middle graters often moving in the words of the spiritual, religion, the gurus, but at a more advanced level than that of the upper lesser type A, positively embrace majority contagion. Lower greater can tolerate it, the increased emotional output, entertaining them. Upper greater can see a use for it. And thus, it is the greater narcissist that is more likely to be attracted to the presence of contagion at the higher levels. If you'd like to know whether you're an empath, you can use the empath detector, link in the video description. And if you are, it will tell you whether you have an aspect of contagion, whether it's insignificant, significant, strong, very strong, or whether you have a majority. And thus you can learn more about what that means in tandem with the other aspects of the school and cadres. There will also be forthcoming works providing you with a deep dive into more about the contagion. Please ensure that you've liked this video, that you subscribe, and that you share it and the other works about the schools and cadres of empaths. I'm H.G. Tudor. Thank you for listening.